All right, well, I'd like to introduce Dr. Elissa Farrow. She's a futurist, author, facilitator, coach, and strategist. I've had the pleasure of being in Elissa's classroom, learning about project management, and she's a wonderful speaker, and we're very, very grateful that she could be with us today to share her knowledge. She has over 25 years' experience in research, organisational innovation, design, adaptation, and benefits realisation. Dr. Farrow is known for her compassionate leadership, I wholeheartedly agree with that, and engagement approach. She's an experienced leader and has been a partner in transformational activities in various industries. So with that, please welcome Dr. Elissa Farrow.
Thank you everybody. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are meeting on. I flew down from Meanjin, otherwise known as Brisbane today, which is the land of the Yagara and Turrbal people. I get to spend a lot of time on beautiful Mid-Jerrabah, which is called North Stradbroke Island, if anyone knows of that beautiful island off the coast of Brisbane. It's the land of the Quandamooka clans, and I do volunteer surf lifesaving there, so I often get to feel the sand between my toes, and it's something for me that I'm constantly feeling very honoured to be able to do that and work and live in this beautiful place. So I'd like to acknowledge all our friends in Zoom land or Teams land, and the places that you are today. So I'm a social scientist, not a technologist. I finished my doctorate last year, where I had the great pleasure of working with a number of different people looking at the implications of artificial intelligence on organisations of the future. So I set all of my doctoral research 20 years in advance because I thought I wanted to have a little bit of a creative sort of stretch to people's thinking, and had some really fantastic results. It's all publicly accessible, and I know as a result of also being an AIPM member that I'm very happy through Fiona to sort of share the link to that work, which is connected to the University of the Sunshine Coast, which sounds as beautiful as what it is. There's kangaroos on the lawn, and yeah, it's a pretty cool place to go visit if you ever have the opportunity. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey. As Fiona gave a really nice pitch of the general abstract, which you also would have read. In the lead up to today, I also drew on a recent masterclass that I delivered at the Dubai International Project Management Forum, where I got to deliver a 2-day masterclass on big data and AI in project context. I think there were about 55 people in the classroom with me from a wide range of different contexts. Some project managers who are working on, eye-watering types of projects in that Saudi sort of Middle Eastern area. And also people who were just wanting to sort of learn more about what the implications of artificial intelligence could be for project managers so that they could either leverage it or just better prepare themselves. And so my presentation this evening is to sort of try and come to a happy middle ground, knowing that AI technologies have been around for some time, but we've just had like a massive sort of shot in the arm. This is one of the biggest shots in the arm. It was hot news, like Christmas time in January at the Dubai International Project Management Conference. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone has probably heard about it, or hopefully you now know of our chat GPT release. You can see from the screen it's a bit of a headline, because I think even though OpenAI had various iterations of this technology around for a while, it actually, for the first time in November, had a really easy and free front end. And has anyone in the room played with it? Has anyone in Zoom land played with it? I'm sorry, I'm looking behind me. Just do an emoji. Just do an emoji if you have. Yeah, a couple of thumbs up there. Thank you. Since you've had a little bit of a play with it, you know that the possibilities are pretty crazy, aren't they? And when you think about ChatGPT, which is only one little example, that it's actually, with its release in this very user-accepted type of form, essentially is making other AI instances that have been around for a while in the area of art or music or other analytical tools sort of now hitting the spotlight. And so it's quite an exciting time, but it's also a time that, for me, I feel like it's a time that has actually woken people up to the concept, which is awesome. Like, we need a bit of shake up, don't we, sometimes? But woken ourselves up to the realisation that artificial intelligence is not just a thing that we're waiting for, it's here. And it's here in more places than we could possibly realise those. So I was just staggered when I saw the quotation, and I've tried to, in the good spirit of Dr. Farrow, sort of try to reference as many papers as I can here, and I know the recording will be available for you guys to sort of check too. But 2 months, the figure went to 100 million users. 100 million. Twitter, I think, was 9 months to sort of hit anything of that magnitude, and it's just like, whoa, like, happy days for OpenAI, but far out. Like, the implications of this, the implications for teachers in their first term, implications for lecturers at university this term, far out. We're not really quite ready for some of this, but it also opens up incredible opportunities. So from my perspective, tried to keep this presentation reasonably balanced, and also there'll be some time at the end for a few questions. So just wanted to start from the base definition. So in my doctoral research, I actually had a very user-centred perspective. All the people that I worked with in my doctorate were people who were going to be, at some point in their life or career, impacted by artificial intelligence. As a social scientist, strong social justice advocate, I really wanted to make sure that there was a user voice as part of this process. And so they actually defined artificial intelligence for themselves. But this is a sort of generic artificial intelligence definition of that area of computing. It's a creation of intelligent machines that work and react like humans. And there are heaps of different subdomains. Every single subdomain, and it's a growing subdomain field, has a number of specialists that focus on those areas. These subdomains also is where we see the cross-fertilisation. So if we think of simple examples like manufacturing and robotic automation, we've got blended technologies, we've got blended subdomains. So when I'm talking this evening, I'm wanting to talk more about general artificial intelligence definitions as opposed to go down into any specific subdomain. The one that we're probably going to be impacted more as in the project management community is going to be in the areas of machine learning. But I want to acknowledge, since I've been part of AIPM for a million years, that I know that the different types of project managers that we have in our chapter here and AIPM more generally are people that are construction engineers, or maybe they're specialist medical or biomedical engineers. We've got a whole range of different types of project managers, not just technologists. And so in some of those other subdomains, we're using different forms of AI for us to essentially do our work. So in the future, and even in many organisations now, we won't need to send a person down a pipe to check for integrity. We'll be able to use a mixture of drone, vision AI, interpretation forms of AI to essentially do some of those very dusty, dirty, and probably pretty unsafe sort of practices. So that's the sort of first part of the process. So we're in this crazy context. Artificial intelligence has got many subdomains. None of us in this room and in Zoom land need to be experts in any of those subdomains unless it's what we want to do as project professionals, which there is a whole area available for you to basically be part of teams that will be implementing AI solutions into the future. The other part of the puzzle is that artificial intelligence, as my good friend has already alluded to, John, needs data. But it doesn't just need any old data, it needs, in particular, quality data, and it needs a lot of it. So I thought I'd also throw in this presentation for you just a general definition of big data. So this is that large, hard to manage, multiple sort of volumes of information that just cannot in any way be interpreted in traditional ways, like the days of the Excel spreadsheet analysis, which is still an awesome tool, isn't it? We still use it in projects that I'm part of. That it's basically something that we just can't get the same level of analysis and depth of analysis. And big data is made up of 5 core themes. First of all, it's about the type of data that big data is made up of, which is structured, semi-structured, unstructured forms of data, is the sort of data that comes at velocity. So we know the word velocity, any of us using agile ways of working. Velocity means things come quickly. So every time you tap your Opal card, velocity. But then we also have, in terms of big data, variety of different information. So it's not just numerical, it's information of images. It's information about insight. It's information about word and language processing. And the variety of data is growing more and more every year. Volume as well, the sheer magnitude of the size, value for an organisation, the data that we now have, we acknowledge that it is a valuable commodity. It's something that in the old days, maybe we thought, oh, we've got this nice database of different information, but now in its combined power is actually very valuable for the organisation. Very valuable also to inform decisions that will hopefully bring value, especially if you're working in government context, to the broader community and to the broader sort of economy of Australia. And our last concept, veracity. Veracity is another word for integrity and quality. So when we think about big data, we also need to think about veracity, meaning that we are veracious and very thorough with our quality of data. Because as we understand, an artificial intelligence solution, regardless of modality, needs to draw on data. If that data is really average, what do you think the AI solution will give us? Average information. So it's a little bit like a small child, isn't it? So imagine artificial intelligence is like a small child, and that small child, if they're in a loving home, loving environment, getting stimulated with loving, interesting sort of experiences, hopefully that kid's going to work out okay. But sometimes kids, unfortunately, and I've certainly worked in child safety, domestic and family violence prevention spheres of work, if kids don't have that same opportunity, sometimes there may, not in all circumstances, be a correlation that is the reverse. So from my perspective, if you keep that in mind, it means that we are feeding the machine the information that if we feed it the right information with the right parameters, we'll actually start to get information that will be good for humanity and good for our ecosystem, as opposed to just good for the bottom line, which is one of my other sort of philosophies under my doctorate, was making sure that we just keep the human and the planet at the centre of the conversation. So big data and AI, as I've mentioned, it's got this really beautiful relationship, or it's meant to have a synergistic relationship, because they both need each other. And I acknowledge that there's also evolutions in big data, including subsets and other domains of big data, such as data lakes, that are starting to form now as well, which means that big data is a broader range of different data sources. Data lakes, again, it's a subset of that, which can be interpreted in different ways with different solutions, but imagine it as a subset. And at this stage, it's still a very sort of almost hot off the press and evolving area of considering what is the lake of data, not just the big data, but what's the lake that we want to maybe quarantine for use for certain organisational types or sorts of analytic purposes. But the intent of these solutions is to make faster decisions that also will, as I mentioned, bring a greater impact. Excuse me. Happy to take, if there's questions in the chat, feel free to bank them in, or if there's something that's particularly burning, I'm also happy to take the odd segue as we go through as well.
I'll let you know.
Thank you, and same for you guys in the physical realm. A few stats, I always like throwing in stats, like this synergistic relationship. Australian context, this is reasonably reasonably relevant contemporary information, just shows from an Australian context just how AI is taking off in Australia. It's certainly taking off in other countries, but Australia has been a little bit lagging in the past. But I think now people are starting to, as I mentioned earlier, wake up to the opportunity that may exist. And also you can see how in terms of our opportunities over the next few years, where we'll see more and more investment in these areas. And you can see from this graph a number of different domains where they're the top sort of use cases by AI spending, such as, sorry for my weird angles, augmented customer service agents. We've all probably dealt with one of those when we've dealt with our bank. Augmented threat intelligence and prevention systems. So if we're thinking cybersecurity, other forms of threat or almost terrorist attack towards organisations or countries, certainly it's also had early and big investment in the Australian context, and also now a growing area in that whole sort of smart business innovation and automation field. A couple of other graphs, because I know there's some geeky graph people out there, is just also to demonstrate globally the fact that people have realised in government context that this is unregulated. A lot of these organisations, a lot of the utilisation is basically in front of where the government regulation is. But you can sort of see, in a loving way, because we're living in rapidly evolving times, just that we're starting to, over time, this goes up to 2022, the amount of AI-related bills passed into law globally, still tiny, isn't it? Tiny fraction, but at least that trend line is actually going up. And I know the Australian government have done work in that space, but so too have a lot of private sector organisations started to, in the absence of a regulation, started to bring in their own sort of form, at least a standard or a set of guidance that they can use to drive their own investment decision making in the absence or the void of government regulation in this space. But over time, we'll also see a number of test cases. I like this chart. I've put the link down the bottom of where I got this information from Stanford University, and they had 2023 State of Artificial Intelligence, the 14 best charts that they could sort of generate. A lot of them were American, so I only pulled these two. There's another really awesome one that you guys might be interested here at Mott MacDonald from a climate perspective and the actual carbon price, I guess, of these technologies, where it's not good for the environment necessarily at the moment, but it's still happening. But just to see even how to train these AI algorithms takes a lot of energy. ChatGPT at the moment is one of the biggest burners of energy globally because of everyone wanting to play. There's 100 million people wanting to play, but also ChatGPT is still in a learn and test phase. So you can't access information from 2023 in ChatGPT at the moment. It's still, I think 2021 I had on my first slide. So it's still, and a lot of people say, oh, I can get the answers to everything, but you cannot yet because it's still learning. It's still not finished. Still not finished. So this is quite interesting, and it's an uptick in AI controversies, but it's also, I would add, reflective of the fact that there's more AI, so of course the number's going to go up. The more people are aware of this, the more people are experimenting, there'll be more and more different controversies, including things like even Tesla cars that crash, and kill people, or there's examples of where even it wasn't purely AI, but the robo-debt in the Australian context, where systems are not necessarily doing what we had originally hoped. Another classic example was connected to a Twitter feed, which ended up being sort of incredibly racist, biased, and really quickly because of the questions that people were sort of actually asking it at the particular point in time. So we live in really crazy, interesting times as project managers. And AI projects, are totally well on the way, because portfolios, and we all know, hopefully, portfolios, programs and projects, there's a lot of rich data that's possible for us to tap into. And this little picture is just one little example of the information that you can see moving from behind, so that more retrospective type of information, to the information which, as a futurist, I'm particularly interested in, which is more of that anticipatory type of information that comes from things like just little signals that we might sort of, like a sniff in the air, of what's that? Like, is that good or is that not so good? And so for us as project managers, we've got to make sure that we're looking in both directions. And sometimes the default is looking back, the last month, the last fortnight, etc. But we really have to start looking forward, because the environment is more volatile in some sectors than it is and ever was.
We have a comment or a question?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that AI controversies and regulations in this space are inversely proportional?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I would probably say no, not yet. I believe the AI controversies, and certainly encourage you to go to the link that was on the screen, would be connected not necessarily to examples that are happening in those regulated entities, but I would certainly think a bit like Uber as an example. I know that wasn't purely an AI example, but a disruption where the sort of controversies and the issues probably came prior, which prompted the reaction. So it's a bit chicken and egg. Really good question, but I encourage you to sort of dive down further into that Harvard information, where there's a much more richer picture there for you. Yeah, but that's a really good question. Looking forward to more harder questions, of course. Have another wine. I've got a wine, so I'm right.
I've got 2 wines.
Oh, good. That was one of mine. Maybe someone else could get me a wine later. After. But the interesting thing for project managers in the lead up to this presentation is that, go to some of the sources of truth. Gartner's a pretty good one, pretty well respected in many circles. But Gartner's predicting that by 2030, it's got a little bit of time, don't we? 7 years to get our act together. 80% they predict of project management, and they didn't say what type or what sector, is basically something that could essentially be done. Not saying that we will do it, but could be done by big data, machine learning, natural language processing, or some other sort of variant of those aspects. That's pretty big, isn't it? Disruption for the industry, but also incredible opportunity for the industry, I think, especially if we think about the fact that we choose what we replace, hopefully, we choose what we replace, means that maybe we can choose to replace the things that make us a bit busy in project management land, and then enable us as project managers to do things a little bit differently in those domains that actually are the ones we'd love to do more of, but just can't get to it. Yeah?
Make a comment. I'm thinking about this.
Good.
Well, if you look at what project managers do, what we spend time on, at least what I spend time on.
Yes.
About a quarter of my time is spent on reporting, getting that report out to senior management.
Yeah.
Correctly.
Yes.
And I got to get the data in. I got to try to write a report. I got to get it. That can be done by AI.
Yeah.
I still get to get the data in. That part doesn't change. But writing the report, you will free me for at least 3 days of the month.
Yeah.
And,
What are you going to do with that time?
Exactly. You're self-employed.
Do another project, like, you could manage 2 projects.
And things like WBS, I try to getting a WBS done on ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Because in flash, it's done.
Yeah.
And it's cool. And obviously you cannot just feed it in and then it come on. You got to check it and verify, make sure it's right.
Exactly.
But the part in the middle is gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
writing project management plan, PMP. If you feed the data in, why can't it write the PMP for you?
Yeah. Or at least a draft.
So at least a draft.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
always have to verify because the
Yeah.
data could be wrong.
Yeah.
So a lot of the project management work will go.
There will be certainly areas that can, and let me continue and I'll show you some of the areas that, again, I'm setting all this not to make people worried, because I believe that, and my research has demonstrated, if you have like a mindset that you might have heard of fixed and growth mindset, you know, Carol Dweck's work. But even if you remain in more of a growth mindset, which I've sort of revamped to be more of a futures and anticipatory type mindset, which is still about learning and about trial and error and a number of those things, it's proven that you'll be able to sort of adjust better in the real world, along with other resilience and coping strategies. But if you have a fixed mindset, which is like, oh no, what am I going to do? Like, you know, I'm always a project manager and have been for a million years. You may not be able to see the opportunity that will be there. Yeah, because it is, this is us every day. Project managers, data and relational juggling act, where it's, you know, things like scope, things like resources, things like benefits, change management, sort of, and change control related activities. Time we're juggling, budget we're juggling, admin we're juggling, risk we're juggling, quality and stakeholders. We're juggling a lot, aren't we? So if we, again, anticipate forward, think about what Gartner said, saying, well, some of our percentage, they're using the percentage of 80% could be gone by the end of this decade in terms of process that we traditionally do now. There's a lot of opportunities of where AI could assist us through the work. And this is a messy slide. I'm not going to go through these at all, but this is just from my research so far, the possibilities of systems that can start to bring forth a greater impact, greater creativity opportunity for us, greater speed of delivery, and, you know, coining that great phrase of agility. These are sort of the things that they're suggesting that over time, some of the systems may be able to actually replace. Whether we want it to, other question, right? It's a different question about where we choose to invest the replacement factor as opposed to the augmentation factor. There's a lot of different possibilities that could just grow, and some of these you just go, hallelujah.
Well, I think the mindset,
Yeah.
you have to harness that possibility.
Yeah.
To go, you know, harness it, move in the direction you want. I mean, writing a report is a tedious stuff, you know, but there'll be other opportunity, other work.
Yeah.
The project team may be smaller, but I don't think people should be worried about.
No, and that's what the whole philosophy is, that don't be worried, just see it as this is an incredible opportunity for the future of project management and the future of enacting change. But again, in not all industries will this be rapid, not all sectors will even want to go there. Because again, at the moment, and again, I'll draw you to the attention of the reference under each of these slides. And again, this is Contemporary 2023. They were saying this is the list of tools that currently exist that have some degree of AI integration as part of them. And you can see there's quite a few there. Quite a few tools that currently exist. And it means also that over time they're growing in functionality. So ChatGPT, you know, since it's part of an open AI, also implies that you'll be able to essentially tag it in to other processes. So you've got AI instances working together in relation to this. So the tools exist, they're growing in functionality. Whether we choose to invest in them is a totally other story. As part of my research, and give me a time check when we need to, I know we're adding comments as we go, which is cool. Yeah. That in my research, one of the first things that I did, I was in Thailand, I was speaking at a conference there, and I was asking people what were the future organisational scenarios. And, you know, there's a multitude of scenario analysis, you know, categories, I guess, but the one that I chose was connected to this researcher called Swartz. And he talks about best case, worst case, outlier, and business as usual. And again, remembering my research was all set 20 years in advance, so close to 2040. And I asked the participants that were part of that process what they thought the scenarios were. And you can see from this list, there's a few wacky ones, like outliers are always a little bit wacky from time to time, including, a new form of ethnicity, which could, the cyborg sort of concept, which I know has a lot of moral and ethical sort of considerations, but who's got a smartwatch? Has anyone got a smartwatch? Yeah, what if you lose your phone? You're already probably thinking life's different when I've lost that, or my vitals didn't come up on my sleep. What happened in the middle of the night with my heart rhythm? You notice I don't have an AI watch on my hand, but it essentially was sort of like a bit of a cyborg now, even though it's still sort of detached from us. But over time, things might start to shift. The best case, thankfully, best case when we did a prioritisation activity, was that people said in 20 years' time, we would like artificial intelligence, remember a broad definition of AI, not just one specific subdomain, was going to do the jobs that humans don't want to do. And whoever is the human that decides what we do and don't do, that's another question. But they, in that cohort of people, which came from young generation students who were Thai, so from more Asian backgrounds, to some older people who were from more, let's call it Indian or Pakistani backgrounds, to people from Australia. Like I had a whole range of different international diverse ages and ethnicities as part of my work. That's what they agreed. That was the number one, which I think is really awesome, even though you can see that there's a number of other futures, and futurists are meant to talk all the time about futures, not just the future, because everything we do today can bring multiple futures. So futures is that AI does things that we don't want to do. Do you have a question?
One thought. So it doesn't worry me, OpenAI, etc. It sounds great. It's the artificial intelligence that we don't know about that worries me the most.
Yeah.
It's the stuff that isn't open.
Yes.
It's the stuff that private companies are not exposing the general public to.
Yes.
Where regulation doesn't even know that they exist.
Yes.
The militarisation or etc. or the use of those instances.
Yes.
Because you won't be able to tell that they even exist.
No, and they exist now, most likely.
That's the bit that concerns me more about OpenAI and ChatGPT.
Yes.
The stuff that we don't know about.
Yes, yes. And I get concerned also from a perspective of, especially at the moment, with various AI tools that people are playing with, essentially, or experimenting with, or utilising, that all of the information that people are loading up goes into a cloud, and what happens to that information. So they've been talking about caveats for companies: don't put your confidential information. I summarise this client meeting in a legal proceeding. Don't do that. Consider, the fact that it's not like your own little personal friend locked in your own particular server. It's actually prone to attack. I guess, in a loving way. But yeah, it's a very important point and I think that's why a number of big sort of software houses and big influencers in the AI context are really trying to influence the fact that AI ideally needs to be good for humanity, including, but knowing that the people who are the worst case scenarios of who you want to utilise it may actually be investing heavily in it as well. So, but yeah, it's sort of not trying to get into sort of good guy, bad guy, or good girl, bad girl territory, but it's acknowledging that we're in this really polarised position right now, and AI unregulated is one thing, but AI sort of totally loose and used for destructive purposes is a totally other conversation, and one that I don't think many people are ready to know how to defend. Yeah, which is quite interesting.
We've probably got a few questions, but we might let them talk.
Yeah, I'll keep on pushing, yeah. So as part of my part of my doctorate, I came up with 5, you've only got 3 here, 5 different operating models of the future on a continuum of what could happen. The continuum spanned from where we would have organisations or parts of organisations that are still very much human-centred, humans working with humans, humans doing stuff. The other end of the continuum is where we might have machines working with machines and no human intervention at all, where we imagine that my AI is working with your AI. I don't have to sort of be part of that process. It's like a instance to instance or agent to agent relationship. What is more current at the moment is in the middle ground, where there is more of an augmented approach and humans are still, as far as we know, in control of the process. I wanted to introduce you, because I'm going to talk about some future scenarios of project management in the context of this operating models of the future. And I came up with, just this afternoon actually, I thought, a persona would be quite good. And so I came up with this persona of ASA, which is mythical, literally just came out of my head today. And you can see what ASA stands for, which is AI Support Advisor. And weirdly, which I just double checked because I wanted to know whether it actually means anything, if you Google name for ASA, it actually means alive and light and a few other things in various sort of cultural traditions, which is, you know, again, a bit of an interesting thing. It's not registered or trademarked, so feel free to take that, anyone. But ASA is where ASA starts to come in as part of that AI is going to augment our practice. So this is where I'm going to use ASA as a mythical persona, doesn't exist at the moment, of an AI instance that hopefully will be a friend to project managers. So ASA is going to have an effect because ASA is going to become a teammate of ours in a project context. And we know that what this actually means is not just a change to the way we work together, as human to human, it's also going to change the way that almost the concept of our process. So where does, rather than a human to human process, what's the relationship from human to the AI instance to maybe another AI instance to another human? Like, how does that sort of process happen? But also, what does this mean for the team culture? So setting our thoughts into the future, if we had an awesome project administrator who was an AI instance and then we chose to update that model, would we feel sad that this person has been part of project success for a really long period of time? Sorry? Big send-off party. Send-off at the end, yeah. So again, there's a lot of sort of concepts, and so it means that the definition of what a team is might have to shift and change as we sort of change as an organisation. So let's have a look at a couple of different project stakeholders in action in the future of project management. If we're in the scenario where that 80% exists, you know, where Gartner was right, and in certain domains, we've suddenly got a situation where we've got an ASA, AI advisor and support person helping us. So decision makers. So let's imagine that it's the CEO. So I've just got a couple of little scenarios in relation to this process. So the CEO is seeking ideas for new projects to extend market reach or maybe impact. Maybe the chief executive is going to talk to ASA, because ASA is considered around the governance table a trusted advisor. Trusted advisor. This is already starting to happen now in some executive boards in a number of different companies where there is their version of a bit like, what was yours called here? Moata. Moata is at the table. So we check with Moata, do you think that's a good idea? Give us a bit of analysis as to whether or not you think that actually is worthwhile as a concept. Or someone earlier said ChatGPT, like, well, is that feasible? Oh, no, you know, it's not feasible because ChatGPT told us it wasn't. Interesting. Another scenario. So the sponsor's receiving real-time overview of program and analytics and benefits realisation from ASA. The parameters have been set at the beginning of the delivery phase, and ASA alerts the sponsor only to areas they need to respond to. Cool. Again, this doesn't exist now, right? Just caveats, futures thinking, stretch your creativity. The sponsor is using ACER with the project manager to determine the feasibility of options to get a project into green. Scenarios are simulated, a decision made and communicated to the project team for action. ACER automatically updates the plan and the registers. Far out. Ripper. Anyway, again, these are all, knowing that we've got a number of solutions. In the future, this could be it, right? It's worth us thinking as we go through, not like, oh my gosh, what does that mean for my job? But what are the opportunities? But also, what do I need to do to learn, grow, and be ready for this new world, especially if you're not going to retire in the next 7 years, if you're going to kick on for a little bit longer after that in project management, I'll say, as opposed to being alive. The next person, project managers, love them. I love this picture of this lady. The project manager is focusing their 80%, back to that Gardner report, on quality, design and relationship building. ACER's covering the rest. Whew, different version of project manager. Get those design thinking skills up. The next one, as a concept, the black box of the Zoom is right over my middle of my screen, but don't worry. The project manager is managing a hybrid team. The human team members channel their extra energy towards benefits and positive change. Oh. Final one, the project manager has time for self-reflection. Wow. Learning and coaching others. ACER runs the induction. Yeah, go girl, or go they, we'll say. We'll call it androgynous. That's the last one. They do the induction. And last one, which is going to, I think, more affect, in my view, PMOs, actually. So the PMO, again, that's a bit tiny writing, sorry, but the PMO is ACER for small projects, and hybrid and leaner for more complex initiatives. ACER covers manual data process and report generation, you'll be pleased to know. ACER's VA function, cool, provides support functions such as status updates, minute taking and transcription, and regular communication distribution. Ripper, that sounds good, doesn't it? A good dream about this. The PMO services more projects, and human team members shift from admin and analysis to validation. Exactly, it's almost like we're reading each other's minds. Validation and verification. I'm calling it the ethical assurance lens. That's that checking, so that we know that we're not just taking the machine's input as something that's actually the right decision. Final one is that the PMO has a contracted model of service with other human specialists and AI agents in and out of the organisation. ACER manages the basics of contract management and contract drafting. Yeah, the basics of, get your report in, or send your invoice, or this timesheet's inaccurate based on my analysis. So this is what the future could be like, which is what I wanted to prompt and challenge your thinking as a futurist. I'm thinking AI can bring incredible opportunity, but we do need to be ready. And I really feel how to get to the future, we need to have some very clear guiding principles. And this is the governance layer, regulatory layer, but it's also what we want to actually have here internally within our various organisations. If the government regulation is too broad or too narrow. These lenses that you can see, these 8 lenses, came from my research, and they're in a published article which was talking about extending the participant's voice to guide AI installation using futures methodologies. Some of them you'll see are very similar sort of ethical sort of frames. So making sure that what is our commitment to the human in the automation process. Do we want to sacrifice our PMO for an ACER? Or do we want to think about, well, actually, maybe we don't want to do that? It's when you think about aged care, for example, would I want a robot looking after my granny or my mother? Maybe not. I'd like a warm human to maybe do some of those core things, but an AI robot can do a bit of cleaning around the place and a few other things like that. But think about what is our position. What is our position in terms of the concept of personal choice and freedom of use? Have we lost that? Sometimes organisations have just gone, no, But think about this from a guiding principle, at least what is our position on some of these broader sort of ethical sort of constructs. And as project managers, rather than necessarily just deploying without thinking about it, these are the really awesome conversations to have as part of the status, the startup sort of conversations, the business case process, is some of these guiding principles so that we can then better shape the features, the functions, the utilisation of these solutions. And it's way more than a technology install. Way more. This model, again, from my research, looks at not just the adaptation approach. So the adaptation for me was about not just project delivery, it was organisational change, the psychology, the hearts, the minds. But then we think about it that we actually can't really change one part of our organisational ecosystem without affecting others. And so we take that out another layer. This project is going to affect this other part of our organisational system and structure. This context that we're operating in will vary if we're a global organisation, a government organisation, a little non-profit organisation that I do regular work with. And so we think about some of those other concepts, even around concepts to do with national sovereignty, which you might think that's a bit wacko, but you think, well, in some countries, AI take-up and use will be mandatory. And people may not necessarily have a choice because that might be the particular political model that exists at this particular point in time. So it's important for us to sort of think about, in my view, the consequences of doing AI and building in AI as part of our organisational ecologies, because it will have a broad effect way beyond the walls of the organisation. So last two slides. Agree on your ethical lens. Everyone will have different perspectives. You've named a really, really wise one down the back there. Agree on your ethical lens. And this is just a few items that are easily accessible, but think about the things from me. As a social scientist, this concept of respecting people's dignity, choice and control, giving people the option to talk to a human as the opt-out button, would be really cool to have. Ensure that no harm comes to users, and we also think about that harm not just being to humans, but animals, to our ecology, our biosphere as well. Making sure that we really validate the affiliations of some of the vendors that we may be working with who are progressing in this area. Do we want to work with them if they have heavy defence contracts around militarisation? Maybe we need to do some due diligence in some areas, and every organisation will have their own ethical lens about that. Some people might be totally fine with that as an option. But also really just make sure that that security is there. So think about cyber crime, cyber integrity. But also for me, the final closing point is to not ever lose your ability. I call it a bit of like the spider senses, but Spider-Man sort of, oh, I can feel something here, that sense check. Don't lose your ability to sense check. And this model I quite like. It's sort of from a sort of health perspective, but I think it's really relevant when I think about how I sense the world and make meaning of the world, is to make sure that we don't just think about things, we remember our gut, our intuition as part of this. And a project manager, sometimes that's their first sort of inkling, isn't it? When you go, oh, something's feeling a bit weird, or I'm getting a bit of a vibe from this particular stakeholder. Think about your heart as well from that ethical perspective. And it's the balance between the three of those sorts of concepts. And do whatever you can, especially in this world where there's so much fake news and there's a lot of access to information, a lot of sharing of information, that we work out our approach to how we want to fact check, sense check, and keep sort of grounded when everyone else is sort of spinning around. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. Very happy to take a few questions. I know we've taken a few questions, but leave you guys for the time. But feel free to keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have some questions from our Zoom land?
We certainly do.
So while Kylie's looking for those questions, I'll ask the first one from the floor.
Yeah.
In relation to AI, a lot of what you talked about and what I see in what I do is a blending of what is already automated and there's certain sort of algorithms or formulas that provide an outcome. Is there a blurring of between just automation versus AI and that discussion that we need to differentiate between what we should be sort of worried about in terms of what AI presents to us versus what's just presented to us through an automation workflow of giving us some information and we're expected to interpret it?
Yeah, I think there is a very grey line between the two, and there's some things that, you know, a bit of a no-brainer from an automation perspective. If we can put in those right checks and balances, especially around the data quality lens, which is sometimes a bit of an issue. I think there are certainly categories of risk associated with this, but I also think that sometimes if we blindly go in with thinking, oh, we can automate all of those processes, we may not think broad enough and not actually see what this might mean for the broader not environmental ecosystem, but organisational ecosystem. And one of the reasons why I say that is that sometimes people might think, well, I'm just implementing this new solution, technology solution, but then I'm not actually thinking about what the broader process implications are, the cultural implications, the staffing complications, and there's often a disconnect between how the strategy is actually formed. It's often a digital strategy, an automation strategy, disconnected from the workforce strategy, and I believe in bringing those strategic domains together if we truly want to look at our organisation and what's that target operating model going to look like in the future.
Thank you.
If that covers. Yep. Got a question, Zoom friends?
AI is the ability of the machine to display human-like capabilities such as reasoning, learning, planning and creativity. Would machine learning predict the future risk or address an issue based on only what it learns, thus reduce administration or provide content for PM to make decisions on?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's happening now in some contexts. I think there's probably in the future going to be the concept of how much will the human need to do, and is it just a validation of the end decision point or the options that an AI machine learning instance might generate, or is it actually a bit back further in the process? So yeah, I think that's a good point.
And I won't read out the next one because somebody actually did a chat GPT response and pasted it in.
Oh, good job.
That's there for anybody who wants to read it. And
Yeah.
I'll have that. To fast track the AI, are there movements for a global database on project management companies to tap into?
No, but that slide that I put up there was one that I just found myself, which talks about 13 or 14 examples of AI integrated project management solutions. So it looks a bit like a flower, but yeah, so there are certainly solutions out there. Whether they're good, bad, ugly, I can't comment, and I'm certainly not vendor affiliated.
Do you want to do one in the room if anybody has one?
Yep.
Do you think the AI with its replacement or augmentation activities, will this lead to increase in success rate of projects?
I would like to think possibly
Knowing
yes.
success rates are
Yeah, I would like to think possibly yes, but again, it's what feeds the machine. If it's still rubbish in, well, still AI, no matter how beautiful and technologically brilliant it is still going to give us biased or faulty information. And I believe that in 10 years' time, like that 20% that Gartner talk about will be the validation, vetting, the sense-making. And if you blindly just say yes, you may be exposing yourself to risk. That's just my current view, but over time that might shift in some industries, yeah.
We've got one around creativity, which is, can you give an example where AI can replace creativity? I think there's plenty of AI apps that do it currently.
Yeah, some drawing apps. I was on a panel recently in Brisbane that was actually had a panel of me talking more socially, social impacts, but then there were artists on the group as well. Yeah, so there are artists who are actually basically becoming actively utilising it. One of the people on that panel were talking about using, what's it called? I can't remember the name of the solution. I can get back to that person. But they were writing a children's novel, they were writing a film, and they needed some prototyping and a prototype board of the storyline, and they were utilising various AI solutions for images as well as words. Yeah, so from that artistic, creative perspective, yeah.
There's an example where an AI-generated photo won a photo competition.
Yes,
You can
yes.
see all
Yes, and one of...
They didn't disclose it until they won it.
Yes, yes, and one of the people on my panel was a First Nations artist from Mianjin, and he was talking about, because a lot of his images were online, about also the line that is sort of the ethics line, because some of his symbols that he has permission from his elders to utilise, and I think there was something about a Maori woman also who was basically had some of her motifs stolen, you know, what that means for copyright, what that means for ownership of even style.
I think we've probably got time just for one more at the back of the room.
Yeah, I guess my question is more around, I guess, the value of data, and I guess on the flip side, the reliability that data can be.
Yes.
And I was fascinated, I guess, a couple of years ago, but haven't really kept up with it around things like data trusts and, I guess, responsible sourcing of data, which is basically the raw material that goes into all this.
Yes.
Just wondering if you had any, if there were sort of bodies that had advanced this, and if you think that's actually going to have a significant impact on how a lot of these develop, or if that's just more of a compliance issue on the side.
No, I think it is, and the acknowledgement, especially with the shortfall of clever people to create, you know, unique and bespoke solutions, that people will be probably buying data sets to feed their machine. If they don't have certain segments of data available, they'll just, like any market research company, probably has a data bank that they would then be able to provide on a subscription basis. So it's definitely going to get bigger, because there's little organisations can't afford the staff sometimes to even do this stuff or build your own, and they also may not be able to afford smaller organisations to even the storage costs. So there will be probably, I think, business opportunities, if that's your line, to sort of think about that sort of, you know, who owns certain data sets, and also the protection of the data sets as well. Yeah. Yes. Cool.
Well, thank you, everyone. Please join me in thanking Elissa for a magical tour of AI. All I can say is I hope that ASA reports to me and that I don't report to ASA, so I can keep my job. As a small token of our appreciation, please enjoy a fabulous dinner on us.
Oh, thank you.
Very much appreciated you coming to talk to us.
Thank you.
Coming all the way down from Queensland. Lovely to have you.
Thank you.
So enjoy.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
just have a quick wrap up before we go. Thanks to everyone online, and thank you very much for bearing with us due to our technical difficulties. We hope that you stayed and you found it really worthwhile. Just in closing, I'd like to let you know about the next AIPM New South Wales event, which is in conjunction with the Australian Cyber Security Centre in the Sydney CBD. It's about cybersecurity for project managers. So that should be very interesting. 10th of May, midday. Please join us. It's a hybrid event. If you'd like to come into the city and join us at the Australian Cyber Security Centre, please do. Please bring government ID, because it's a tough facility to get into. But if you would like to hybrid in, we'd be more than happy to have you there as well. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate people making the effort to come and see us face to face. Lovely to see everyone again. And thank you, people on Zoom. Appreciate you bearing with us. And have a wonderful night, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks, everyone.